The Galactic Council had never seen anything like it. When the human diplomats' fleet arrived at the council chambers, the first thing that caught the attention of every alien species was the utter lack of weapons. No combat ships, no security detail armed to the teeth, no diplomatic guards carrying the usual arsenal of plasma rifles, shock grenades, or energy shields. Just a single sleek transport ship, its hull unmarked, its crew seemingly unarmed, and its passengers exuding a confidence that was as palpable as it was unsettling. Ambassador Ilara of Earth stepped off the transport, her composed demeanor betraying no hint of the turmoil that had preceded this moment. Behind her, the human guards, 3 men and 2 women, followed in near-perfect silence. Their clothing was simple, not ceremonial, not intimidating. A far cry from the regal armor or tech-clad uniforms that the other species on the council were accustomed to seeing. Yet, despite the absence of any visible means of defense, none of the other council members dared underestimate the human presence. The doors to the chamber slid open as Ilara approached, revealing the alien assembly. Every seat at the round table was occupied by representatives of powerful galactic empires, each more accustomed to wielding force than negotiating peace. Each race had a long history of war, betrayal, and fear, and none had ever seen a species like Earth's. As Ilara entered, the council fell into an uneasy silence. Eyes narrowed. Whispers traveled along the polished stone walls. The humans' reputation had preceded them, most of it based on myths, rumors, and the terrifying legends of human military prowess. Yet here they were, standing at the threshold of the most powerful political institution in the galaxy, without a single weapon between them. A gruff voice broke the silence. It belonged to Councillor Mornak of the Solaran Dominion, a race known for their brutish military tactics and unmatched weaponry. His 4 arms folded across his chest, his expression scornful. "Ambassador Ilara," Mornak growled, his voice thick with disdain, "I must admit I'm surprised. You represent one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and yet you come to us unarmed. No weapons? Not even a bodyguard with a stun rifle." Ilara's eyes locked onto his with a calmness that belied the intensity of the moment. "No, Mornak. No weapons. And no need for them." Mornak scoffed, his yellow eyes flickering with skepticism. "Perhaps you think your reputation will suffice. But we don't negotiate with empty hands here, Ambassador. You must know that." The other council members murmured in agreement. Some raised their brows in curiosity, others in suspicion. The diplomatic protocols of the council were clear. Any representative entering the chamber was to be accompanied by armed guards, proof of their strength and authority. To arrive without weapons was not only an insult, but an invitation for chaos. Ilara took a step forward, her voice calm but firm. "It's not the weapons that define us. It's our resolve." Her words echoed in the chamber, every eye on her. "We don't come to threaten you, Mornak. We come to negotiate, to form alliances that benefit us all." "Form alliances?" Councillor Lorith of Enavrans, a creature with bioluminescent skin, tilted her head, skeptical. "Why would we ally with a species so unpredictable? Your history is riddled with wars. You fought your way to the top of your sector. Yet you come here without a single weapon to show for it. Are you underestimating us, Ambassador?" Ilara met her gaze evenly. "Not at all. But you underestimate us if you think our strength lies in guns or bombs." She glanced at the guards behind her. Each of them stood at attention, their faces unreadable, their hands at their sides. Not a single one carried a weapon. The chamber was still. For a moment, even the most hardened council members looked uneasy. The unspoken question echoed in every mind. What were humans hiding? What made them so certain of their power that they didn't need the weapons that every other species considered essential? "I would be glad to answer your questions," Ilara continued. "But first, I ask that you listen to what we have to offer, without fear, without suspicion." There was a tense silence. The alien races glanced at each other, exchanging looks. Ilara's calmness was both disarming and terrifying. The absence of weapons did not make her vulnerable. It made her, unervingly, more powerful. Suddenly, A voice rang out from the back of the chamber. A sharp, high-pitched tone filled the air as Counselors Rith of the Keth, known for their rapid technological advances and cold logic, spoke up. You are sure of yourself, Ambassador. But I suggest you remember rule number 1. You may not be the only ones in this room who have something to lose. Ilara's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. I'm fully aware of that, she replied. But what if the galaxy's most dangerous weapon isn't something you can see? They don't understand, do they? Ambassador Ilara's voice cut through the silence, her words low but sharp enough to make the council members pause. Her eyes scanned the faces of the beings before her, alien races that had waged wars across the stars, that had built empires on the backs of conquerors, and that viewed strength only through the lens of force. They thought they understood power. They were wrong. Ilara exhaled slowly, leaning forward slightly, her hands clasped before her. The guards behind her stood like statues, their stillness unnerving. In a galaxy where power was measured in weapons, fleet size, and firepower, these humans, these diplomats, had chosen a very different path. No shields, no armor, no weapons. The silence hung thick in the air, like a tension about to snap. Mornak, the Solaran counselor, had clearly been waiting for her to speak. His mouth curled into a sneer as he leaned in, ready to pounce. So what exactly is it that you want, human? His tone was biting, but there was an edge of curiosity beneath the aggression. The other counselors were watching her, their expressions a mix of intrigue and disbelief. What makes you so confident, so certain that you can come to this chamber, the most powerful political body in the galaxy, without so much as a single weapon on you? Ilara's smile remained calm, her posture unflinching. She'd expected this. The disbelief, the questions. It was part of the plan. Do you think the galaxy's power lies only in the weapons we wield? Ilara asked, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. That what makes us strong is the ability to destroy. The weapons we bring, the force we can summon. She paused for a moment, allowing the weight of her words to settle. If you believe that, then you don't understand humanity at all. A low murmur rippled through the council members. Even Mornak, who'd been ready to pounce, hesitated. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. He wasn't the only one. Ilara's gaze swept across the room again. She knew what they thought. Humans were dangerous, unpredictable, a wild card in the galaxy's game of politics. But they were missing the point. We don't come here as conquerors, she continued. We come here as something far more terrifying, equals. There it was. The moment that would either turn the tide in her favor or mark the end of her mission. Ilara sat back slightly, her calm demeanor never wavering. It was almost as if she were challenging the council to grasp the weight of her statement. The council was quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded an explosion of conversation, of argument. But before the noise could begin, she spoke again. You see, there is an unspoken rule, one that my people learned the hard way. Rule number 1, she said, her voice carrying the weight of history. No matter how powerful you think you are, the moment you rely on strength to prove your worth, you've already lost. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Mornak's lips pressed together into a thin line. Lorith, the Navran with bioluminescent skin, exchanged a glance with Zrith of the Keth, who seemed deep in thought. Ilara noticed the ripple of discomfort spreading across the room. She wasn't just speaking to them about human history. She was speaking to them about the entire galaxy's future. You see, Ilara continued, humanity wasn't always like this. We were once like you, obsessed with power, with weapons, with destruction. Her voice softened, almost as if she were speaking to herself now. We fought wars, nearly wiped ourselves out more than once. We thought that if we had the biggest guns, the most ships, the greatest fleet, we could control everything. A flicker of something, regret perhaps, flashed in her eyes. She quickly masked it, pressing on. But we learned, she said firmly. We learned that in the end, the strength we wield isn't in our ability to destroy, but in our ability to create. She leaned forward, her eyes locking with Mornak's. Humanity isn't afraid of the war we fought. We're afraid of what we might become if we continue to rely on that strength. We've spent centuries learning that the true power lies in restraint, in knowing when to wield it and when to walk away. The council was listening now, and they were starting to understand. Or at least, they were beginning to question everything they had ever believed about power. "You want to know why we bring no weapons?" Alara said, her tone suddenly resolute. "Because our greatest weapon is something none of you can ever hope to replicate." She paused, her lips curling into a faint, knowing smile. "We don't need them. We've learned how to make peace, and how to make it stick." The room was silent. Even Mornak, who had been prepared to challenge every word she said, stood still, his fists unclenching at his sides. He didn't understand. Not yet. "But there's another reason we come unarmed," Ilara added, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "When you live through the kind of destruction humanity has, you learn something very important. The greatest strength doesn't come from wielding a weapon. It comes from knowing that you don't need one to win." The council was still, a heavy silence enveloping the room. A few exchanged uncertain glances, but none spoke immediately. Ilara had said what needed to be said. The truth, stripped of grandeur or pretension, was undeniable. She wasn't just a diplomat. She wasn't just representing a species that had survived countless wars. She was the living embodiment of their greatest strength, restraint, humility, and the hard-earned knowledge of when to hold back. It wasn't just about weapons. It was about understanding when they were necessary and when they were irrelevant. The truth hung in the air, and it was more terrifying than any weapon could ever be. Humanity didn't learn strength from victory. We learned it from surviving our own destruction. Ambassador Alara's voice carried the weight of 1,000 scars, each word wrapped in the history of a species that had come to the brink of annihilation and survived. Her eyes, steady and unyielding, bore into the council, and for a brief moment, the room felt as though it had been transported to a time long before their ships had taken flight and their wars had been fought. The Solaran Mornak shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his forearms folding across his chest, but he did not interrupt. The Navran Lorith and even Zrith of the Keth leaned in, curiosity etched into their alien features. Ilara knew this moment would either break their skepticism or cement it permanently. She had no illusions about the challenge she was facing. "Before Earth became the home of spacefaring humans, we were not so different from you," Ilara began, her voice steady, but her words cutting through the air like a blade. "We, too, fought wars that tore our world apart, wars that nearly wiped us out. But we didn't just fight for land, for power, or for dominance. We fought because we had nothing left to lose." The room was still. A single glance at the humans standing silently behind Ilara, no weapons, no shields, was enough to tell the council they weren't just hearing a story. They were hearing the story of humanity's evolution. "Imagine, if you will," Ilara continued, her eyes narrowing slightly, "a species that had already destroyed its environment, polluted its skies, poisoned its oceans. Imagine a species that fought wars so fiercely that entire nations vanished overnight, leaving behind nothing but ruins and ash." She paused, letting the image settle over them. Even the most hardened council members couldn't help but picture the desperation, the fear. What would it be like to face that kind of extinction? "When we came to the brink, it wasn't an alien force that brought us to our knees," Ilara went on. "It was ourselves. Humanity had reached the point where we realized something fundamental. We were our own worst enemy. The greatest weapon we had was our own capacity to destroy." A few council members shifted uneasily. The concept was foreign to them. Strength was something to be celebrated, revered, wielded like a sword. To think that true power could come from within, from the ability to rise from destruction, was an alien notion to most species here. The turning point came when we realized we had two options: self-destruct or evolve. And we chose evolution. Alara's words were measured, calm, but each syllable resonated with the history she was recounting. We learned that the true strength of humanity was not in the weapons we could wield or the ships we could send into battle. It was in our ability to rebuild, to adapt, to face our own darkness, and survive. Her gaze locked with Mornak's, and she could see the skepticism in his eyes. But even he couldn't deny the weight of what she was saying. Humanity had taken the hardest path, one fraught with pain and loss, but one that had forged a new way of thinking, a way of peace, tempered by the understanding of just how destructive their potential could be. We spent generations fighting not for conquest, but for survival, Ilara continued. And when we emerged from the ashes, we did so with a new understanding. Power was no longer a weapon or a fleet. It was the ability to live without fear of ourselves. A silence stretched across the chamber. Ilara's words were sinking in. The alien races that sat before her, species that had grown powerful through conquest, were beginning to understand something unsettling. Humanity's greatest strength was not in the tools they wielded, but in their ability to create peace from the very destruction they had once unleashed. We don't carry weapons to these meetings because we don't need to. We've faced our own darkest impulses and come out the other side. And now we extend a hand, not as conquerors, but as equals, hoping to prevent the mistakes we've made from becoming yours. She let the words hang in the air, feeling the gravity of the moment. There was no turning back now. The council members were staring at her, some with dawning realization, others with skepticism that would take time to erode. But the seed had been planted. The silence was thick with the weight of her confession, but it was also filled with something else, a quiet recognition of the strength that came from surviving, not conquering. The humans were not here to rule. They were here to help. And that was more terrifying than any weapon they could wield. The greatest weapon of all is something you can't see, something you can't even imagine. Ilara's words echoed through the council chamber, each syllable charged with an energy that shifted the atmosphere. The council members, previously uncertain, now shifted in their seats, leaning forward in a mix of anticipation and skepticism. Mornak, the Solaran, who had been the most vocal in his doubts, now watched her intently. His forearms, previously folded, rested stiffly at his sides, betraying his tension. "What is it, Ambassador?" Counselor Zrith of the Keth spoke up, his tone both intrigued and cautious. "You claim that humanity's strength lies not in its weapons, but in something else, something hidden. Tell us, what is it that gives your people such confidence?" Ilara's gaze swept the room. She could feel the council's eyes on her, a mixture of curiosity and challenge in the air. They were waiting for her to reveal what, exactly, made humanity so sure of itself. For a moment, she didn't answer. Instead, she simply stared at the council, allowing the weight of the question to linger in the room. "We didn't survive by force," she said slowly, her voice deliberate. "We survived because we learned how to adapt, how to think differently. We learned how to evolve, not just as individuals, but as a species. And that," she paused, her eyes narrowing slightly, "that is what sets us apart." The council remained silent, their faces unreadable. The Solaran Mornak seemed to tense, as if anticipating a follow-up. Ilara took a breath, steadying herself. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment she could either prove humanity's worth or cement their perceived arrogance. "You want to know the secret?" she asked, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "It's not technology. It's not some hidden weapon or unseen force. It's adaptability." The council members exchanged glances, confused by the simplicity of the answer. Adaptability? What did that mean in the context of galactic power? They had been expecting something more, something they could measure, something tangible. But Ilara wasn't finished yet. "Humans have learned to adapt to the environment," she continued. "We've learned to adapt to nearly any situation, any threat, any challenge. It doesn't matter if it's the harshest planet, the most brutal of enemies, or the most catastrophic event. We find a way to survive. We don't give up. We change. And that is why we don't need weapons." Her words settled into the room like a slow burn. Even the most hardened council members couldn't ignore the truth in them. Humanity's strength wasn't in overwhelming force, but in resilience. They didn't need to conquer, they simply needed to endure. and in doing so they won. Mornak broke the silence, his voice edged with disbelief. Are you suggesting your strength comes from survival alone? You think the galaxy will simply bend to your will because of this adaptability? Alara's eyes met his, unwavering. No, Mornak. I'm saying that survival is the foundation. But survival leads to something greater, innovation. The ability to constantly push forward, to evolve and never be bound by the past. To recognize the threat and respond, not with brute force, but with the knowledge that if one solution doesn't work, we will find another. The council was beginning to grasp the weight of her words. They could see it in her eyes, the belief, the conviction that humanity had something no one else could replicate. But what could that something be? What allowed humanity to endure where others would crumble? We've faced the unthinkable, Alara continued, her voice gaining strength. We've been on the brink of extinction more times than any of you can imagine. And each time we've emerged stronger, not because we learned to fight better, but because we learned how to adapt to the chaos. Our greatest weapon is our ability to bend, not break. The alien representatives looked at each other, the implication sinking in. Alara was telling them something far more profound than they had expected. Humanity was not a force to be reckoned with because of its fleets or its technology, but because of something far deeper. The human will to survive and evolve, even in the face of unimaginable odds. You call it adapting, said Lorith, the Navran, her bioluminescent skin flickering as she leaned forward. But how does that make you different from any other species? Surely we all evolve in one form or another. Alara nodded, understanding the confusion. True, she acknowledged. Every species evolves. But humans evolve differently. We faced ourselves. We didn't just adapt to the threats around us. We adapted to our own mistakes. We didn't just survive the wars we started. We learned from them. And in that learning, we found strength. The strength to choose peace over war. To choose collaboration over conflict. Mornak's skepticism still lingered, but even he was beginning to doubt his initial assumptions. And what does this mean for the future of the galaxy, he asked, his voice now tinged with curiosity rather than contempt. Alara took a long, steady breath. It means that we've seen the worst of what we can do, and it means we'll do everything in our power to ensure that no one else has to make the same mistakes. The room fell into a deep, reflective silence. The council members, each of them so accustomed to using power to shape the galaxy, now found themselves questioning their own methods. Alara hadn't given them a weapon, a fleet, or a hidden force. She had given them a truth. Humanity's greatest power lay not in what they had, but in how they adapted, learned, and ultimately chose a path that none of them had anticipated. For the first time, the council saw humanity for what it truly was, a force to be reckoned with, not because of the power it wielded, but because of the power it had refused to wield. It's easy to claim peace when you have no one willing to challenge you. Mornak's voice boomed across the chamber, his words sharp and accusing. The tension in the room thickened, the silence hanging heavy like a storm waiting to break. The Solaran had never been one for diplomacy, and it was clear he wasn't about to start now. His 4 arms were spread wide, as if daring anyone to oppose him. Alara stood firm, her expression unreadable, but beneath the calm surface, her mind was already calculating the next move. She knew this was coming. She had expected it. Mornak had been testing her words from the moment she set foot in the council chamber, pushing her to see if the human's claim of peace was merely a facade. Well, Ambassador, Mornak continued, his tone dripping with disdain, you've had your say. Now let's see if your species truly understands what peace means. Show us. Prove it. Alara's eyes never wavered from his gaze. She had known that words alone wouldn't convince the council. They needed a demonstration, a test that would challenge everything she had said about humanity's strength. What kind of test do you suggest? She asked, her voice calm but resolute. Mornak's lips curled into a grim smile. Let's see if you can walk the walk. No weapons. No shields. Just your guards and your words. Prove to us that humanity can survive not just by adapting, but by overcoming the greatest threats. There it was, the challenge. Mornak wasn't just questioning humanity's strength. He was daring Alara to show that her species could withstand the same brutalities that had shaped every other galactic race. The other council members, for the first time, seemed to hold their breath. This was no longer a debate. This was a trial. Alara's mind raced, but outwardly she was composed. "And what would you have us face?" she asked. She knew Mornak wasn't about to offer a simple test of diplomacy. He was about to throw humanity into the fire. The Solarans' eyes gleamed with cold amusement. "You'll find out soon enough. You'll have no weapons, no reinforcements. Just you and your guards." He motioned toward the far side of the chamber, where a hidden door slid open with a metallic hiss. Out of the shadows emerged a towering figure, an imposing, armored creature that none of the council had seen before. Its body was covered in thick, chitinous plates, its eyes glowing a harsh red. The thing was a walking tank, a brute that would tear through anyone who dared stand against it. The room fell silent as the creature stepped forward, its claws scraping against the stone floor with every heavy step. "This," Mornak said, his voice laced with satisfaction, "is the test. A trial of strength. You will face this creature one-on-one and prove that humanity's so-called strength is more than words. Let's see how long you last." The council members murmured amongst themselves, some with excited anticipation, others with quiet uncertainty. Alara didn't flinch. The test was brutal, yes, but it was a test humanity could face. It was exactly what they had survived time and time again, facing the unknown, the seemingly insurmountable, and finding a way to adapt and overcome. "Alara," one of her guards whispered, his voice laced with concern. "We can't win this. It's not possible." Alara's eyes remained locked on the creature as it loomed in front of her. She turned to her guards, her expression unwavering. "We don't need to win," she said quietly. "We just need to survive. That's all we've ever had to do." The creature took another step forward, its claws clicking ominously against the stone. The council held its collective breath, watching the humans, waiting for them to either cower or fight. Alara took a slow, deliberate step forward. The creature's eyes narrowed in response, its heavy limbs tensing in preparation for the inevitable conflict. Yet, Alara didn't move in an aggressive stance. She simply waited, her posture calm, her demeanor controlled. The other council members were still, captivated by the unfolding moment. They didn't understand why Alara wasn't rushing to defend herself. They expected the humans to react as any other species would, with force, with violence. But Alara wasn't reacting at all. Mornak's eyes narrowed. "You don't plan on fighting?" he sneered. "No," Alara said quietly, her voice a steady force of its own. "I plan on showing you the greatest strength humanity has. And it's not in fighting." Without warning, she stepped aside. The creature paused, confused for a moment by her sudden movement, its monstrous form poised to strike. But then, just as quickly as it had arrived, it faltered. The thing hesitated. Alara's eyes never left the creature as she spoke softly, almost as if to herself. "We survive. We endure. And we adapt." Her words were the only weapons she needed. The creature's body twitched, then slowly, inexplicably, it backed away. The room was stunned into silence. Mornak's face twisted in disbelief. The Keth's glowing eyes flickered with uncertainty. The test wasn't over, but the creature had stopped, unsure of its next move. Alara turned back to the council, her calm gaze sweeping across the room. "That," she said softly, "is humanity's strength. We don't fight unless we have to. But when we do, we fight with everything we are." The silence in the chamber was profound. For the first time, the council wasn't just questioning humanity's strength, they were witnessing it. You think you've seen humanity's strength? You've only scratched the surface. The room was still, the air thick with disbelief. Mornak, his forearms crossed tightly, stared at Alara as though she were some kind of enigma he could not quite comprehend. The Keth, Zrith, and even Lorith of the Navran all remained silent, waiting for the next move, unsure whether the test had been completed or if another challenge would soon follow. But Ilara knew there was no need for more tests, no more demonstrations. What they had witnessed was the essence of humanity's power, not in brute force, not in weapons, but in the ability to endure, adapt, and most importantly, to understand when not to fight. Yet she had one more truth to reveal. The Council had seen humanity's restraint, felt its strength in survival, but they still didn't understand the full depth of the human spirit. She had to show them that there was a power, a potential, that no other species could fathom. And now, in this room, she would unveil it. Ilara, Mornak's voice broke the silence, his tone sharp. You've proven that you're more than just conquerors. But that doesn't explain everything. There's something you're not telling us. What is this greater strength you keep alluding to? What exactly do you mean? Ilara took a deep breath, her eyes steady as she surveyed the Council. She had told them that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't physical, but now it was time to reveal what they had been unknowingly searching for all along. You've seen our strength, she began, her voice firm. But you've missed the most important part. You've missed what makes humanity truly different from every other species in the galaxy. The Council's eyes narrowed. This was it, the moment when Ilara would either shatter their perception of her species or confirm their suspicions. The thing that gives us our strength, she continued, is not our ability to fight. It's our ability to change, to reinvent ourselves in the face of unimaginable odds. We don't just survive, we grow. We adapt in ways that other species can't. Her voice was low, but unwavering. We aren't bound by our history. We learn from it, and we move forward. The Keth's glowing eyes shifted, signaling a moment of understanding, but Zrith remained silent, staring at her with intense curiosity. Loritha's bioluminescence flickered as she processed Ilara's words. It's not just survival, Ilara went on, her gaze sweeping the room. Humans have this unique ability to create something from nothing. In times of extreme adversity, when everything seems lost, we don't wait for salvation. We make it ourselves. We shape our future, no matter how bleak the past. Mornak opened his mouth to speak, but Ilara held up a hand, signaling him to wait. You're wondering why we don't need weapons? Why we don't rely on force to get what we want? And the answer is simple, she said, her voice now filled with conviction. Because we've learned to create what we need without destroying what others have built. Our greatest strength is our innovation. Our minds are our sharpest tools, and they've allowed us to survive, to thrive, and to stand here today in front of you. The room was silent for a long moment as the Council members absorbed her words. Slowly, realization began to settle in. This wasn't about humanity being weak or naive. It wasn't about avoiding war. It was about how humans approached the impossible, how they didn't just react, but created solutions where there seemed to be none. You speak of creation, Mornak said finally, his voice quieter, less accusatory. But what exactly do you mean? What could humanity possibly have that could truly rival the power of our fleets or our weapons? Ilara smiled just a little. You're looking at it. She motioned to the guards standing beside her, the same ones who had remained calm during the test. What you don't know, she said, is that we've developed a technology that can shape the very fabric of reality, not just through physical weapons, but through knowledge, through understanding things others wouldn't dare touch. The Council stared, the weight of her words sinking in. This was something no one had expected, not even the most seasoned diplomats on the Council. You can't control it, Ilara said, but you can harness it. And that, she finished, is why humanity will always be a force to be reckoned with. We aren't just a species that survives. We are a species that shapes the universe itself. The chamber fell into a stunned silence. The Council had thought they understood the human species, had thought they could measure humanity's power by what they could see, what they could calculate. But Ilara had just revealed something far more profound, something that made every weapon, every fleet, seem like child's play. Humanity wasn't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to change the very rules of existence. And in that, they had no equal.